Purchasing meat like beef, chicken, pork, and also fish can take a huge chunk out of our grocery budgets. That's why I think even if we aren't eating vegetarian 100% of the time, it can be really helpful to have a few meatless meals in our repertoire to save a little money here and there. Today, I'm going to share with you a few meatless meal ideas that even my meat-eating family really likes, and just some other ideas about how to incorporate more meatless meals into your weekly meal plan so that you can save a little money over the long run. I also want to point out that these recipes are vegetarian and that I'm not using any meat, but they aren't all vegan or plant-based, though I will try to give some ideas for how you might be able to make it plant-based if I can, and you might have some ideas as well for how you can make substitutions in these recipes, and you can leave them in the comments below. I've already got tonight's dinner going in the slow cooker behind me. It's gonna be kind of like a minestrone inspired soup, but instead of using traditional pasta, I'm gonna use cheese tortellini. So I'll show you how I'm doing that here in just a second. But the reason that I really need a good crock pot meal tonight is because I'm going to be spending most of the afternoon and evening in the mom van shuttling kids around. I mean, we have parent-teacher conferences, we have swim, we have lacrosse, we have more swim. My husband has meetings all night at work, so he's not able to help me out. So I'm about to jump in the mom van and do all the mom things with the kids. And instead of reaching for my traditional coffee or Diet Coke, I'm actually going to whip up one of these green drinks from Bloom. It has over 30 organic fruits and vegetables, antioxidants, probiotics, and it actually tastes amazing. I was really surprised when I opened it up and I saw the color, and then I mixed it up and I tasted it. It tastes so, so good. And I have really been enjoying working that into my daily routine instead of just always reaching, you know, for the sodas and things. Okay. Let's do this. These types of things can seem like a big investment up front, but when I actually do the math on it, it costs me less than half what I would normally pay for a fountain soda to make one of these drinks for myself. And it's like 1/4, like 25% of what my normal coffee order would be at a place like Starbucks. But let me show you what I have going in the crock pot, and then I'll show you how I'm finishing it up when I get home later. Into my slow cooker, I am putting half an onion chopped, 2 stalks of celery chopped, and my carrots were pretty big, so I actually ended up only using 2 of them, and I peeled and sliced those. I'm also gonna put in about half this bag of frozen green beans. I debated whether or not to use canned green beans, but I figure since I'm gonna be letting this simmer most of the day, those green beans will get nice and tender. Also gonna use about a tablespoon of this minced garlic. To season this, I'm gonna use about 2 teaspoons of salt because I'm not going to be using broth. If you're using vegetable broth as your liquid, then you might wanna cut back on the salt. I'm gonna use about 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning, 1 to 2 teaspoons. Some pepper, a couple of bay leaves, 2 to 3 depending on the size. I'm not even sure what kind of flavor bay leaves add, but they're called for in so many soup recipes that I just don't ask questions. So you can educate me in the comments below if you want to tell me why I need bay leaves in my soup. But one thing I know I like to use in my soups when I can are these Parmesan rinds. These are the ends of the wedges of Parmesan that I buy, and I just stick them in a little baggie in the freezer, and throwing a couple of them in here, 2 to 3 depending on the size of the soup that I'm making, it just adds a lot of flavor to the soup because all that flavor from the Parmesan will simmer with the other ingredients. Now I'm gonna add 1 can of cannellini beans. You can add more if you want. If you wanna double up, I'm just using 1 can because my family are not huge fans of kidney beans, but we can make do with 1 can. And I'm gonna add 1 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes. You could use whole, you know, like diced tomatoes if you wanted to instead of using the crushed ones. I'm just gonna love how this is sort of gonna simmer together. And then I filled this can up about 2/3 of the way with water. It's gonna be about 3 cups or so of water. And now I'm just gonna pop the lid on and let it simmer all day. How long you let it simmer depends on how much time you have. A couple of hours on high, 4 to 5 on low, you know, it just depends on when you're getting it going. But stay tuned because we're going to come back and finish this up with some more ingredients once it's done simmering. Now, if you wanted to keep this dairy-free, basically make it plant-based, you would, of course, not use the Parmesan rinds that I used. And then once it's done simmering, you could add just a traditional pasta, like a rotini or an elbow or a ditalini, the little bitty be round ones. And you could also add a little plant-based cream or milk. I actually used this coconut milk a few weeks ago to make a delicious chickpea noodle soup. I'll see if I can find that video and leave it linked for you in the description box because it was really good. I'm definitely gonna make it again. And it was a plant-based, meatless recipe. What I am going to do now that this has been simmering for a few hours is add about half a bag of frozen tortellini and about 1 cup of heavy cream. And it's just gonna take another 15 minutes or so in the slow cooker to cook that tortellini and bring everything up to temperature. And then we will have a really delicious meal that we can have with a little bit of toast or with a side salad or just all on its own. For tonight's dinner, I am making some serious, cozy comfort food. I am going to be making a cheesy broccoli rice casserole. It's gonna be delicious. To really rev up the filling factor of this meal, I'm going to be using something that I have mentioned many times as an unsung hero in the protein world, and that is cottage cheese. Cottage cheese has anywhere between 10 to 14 grams of protein per half cup serving, depending on the kind that you buy. I like to buy the Good Culture cottage cheese if I'm eating it plain. Like if I'm having this by itself, or maybe, you know, as a side or with a salad, I think it's worth it to pay a little bit of the extra money that this costs. It's a little bit pricey if I'm gonna be eating it just as cottage cheese. But when I'm using it in recipes, I just buy the store brand because I can get a big 24-ounce container like this for usually around $3 or less. And if you're not sure about cottage cheese, if it's not something you have liked in the past, or maybe you're just trying it again for the first time, or maybe it's a texture issue, I think that's the case with a lot of people who say they don't like cottage cheese. You might try putting it in your blender and or your food processor and pureeing it for this kind of recipe. I think it works just as well. It doesn't have to be just plain cottage cheese. Everybody in my family likes it, so I don't usually take that extra step, but you could try that if you wanted to. For this recipe, I'm gonna be using 2 cups of rice, 2 cups uncooked. I'm actually cooking it on the stove right now. And I'm using a wild rice blend that I have in my pantry, but white rice, brown rice, however you want. You just want 2 cups dry and then cook it on up. I'm going to use about 1 pound of frozen broccoli. I'm not even gonna bother probably cooking that because again, it's gonna cook along with the casserole when we reheat it in the oven. I'm going to be making my own version of a cream of soup. You could just use a can of cream of mushroom or, you know, cream of chicken if you're not worried about it being completely vegetarian. Cream of celery would probably work in this as well. I'm going to make mine on the stove by using 3/4 of a cup of milk and 3/4 of a cup of vegetable broth and 3 tablespoons of cornstarch that I just bring up to heat over medium heat until it thickens. I'm gonna stir that all together with 1 cup of cottage cheese and half a cup of plain Greek yogurt. And I'm actually going to use a full fat, like a 5% fat Greek yogurt. I feel like the non-fat yogurt, when I use it in cooking, it tends to get kind of watery, it separates some. So I like to use the full fat, but whatever you use, make it plain. You don't wanna put vanilla or strawberry yogurt into your broccoli cheese casserole. I'm gonna season it with some salt, some pepper, some Italian seasoning, some garlic powder. You could, you know, use whatever seasonings you like. That tends to be what we like. Spread that all in a casserole dish and then top it off with some shredded cheddar and pop it in the oven at 350 until it's bubbly and heated through, probably about 30 to 40 minutes. A very quick, rough calculation, adding the cost of the ingredients together that I used to make this casserole, tells me that it cost me $9.63, and that was with using some premium ingredients like the wild rice mix that I used and the Fage yogurt. And this casserole dish will easily feed 6 people a very large portion. Actually, I think it probably serves 8 or even 10 people if I'm feeding kids. So not a bad deal whatsoever, and it's still gonna have lots of protein. It's gonna be very filling and really tasty. I used to be a person who thought that protein basically had to come from meat or dairy. You know, I thought if I wanna up my protein content, I've gotta be drinking milk or eating cheese or eating chicken breast or beef or something like that. But as I started to really take a look at labels and also research the macronutrient makeup of various foods, I was really surprised to find how rich in protein some foods are that I used to think had nothing at all. I think a lot of people, when they're thinking of more plant-based protein substitutes, will immediately go for beans. This is a can of pinto beans. It has 7 grams of protein per half cup serving. I really like chickpeas myself in different recipes, and these have 6 grams of protein per half cup serving. But believe it or not, a serving of pasta typically has anywhere from 7 to 8 grams of protein in just like the standard pasta. Even most fruits and vegetables have a little bit of protein in them. For instance, this Steam in the Bag California medley, which is just cauliflower, broccoli, and carrots, has 2 grams of protein per 1 cup serving. And 2 grams doesn't seem like a lot, but if I'm getting my recommended 5+ servings of fruits and vegetables, I could be getting 10 or even 15 or more grams of protein just from eating my fruits and veggies. So what I discovered is that I don't always have to have meat in my recipes to make it filling and satisfying. There were lots of ways to make my recipes protein rich without having to use any meat. I have made lots of meatless meals over the years, and some of my favorites I actually gathered into one video that I put out last summer. I will leave it linked in the description box below. It's 20 ideas for meatless meals that my family really liked. So if you're looking for some more recipe inspiration, check out that video after you watch this one. The next recipe I'm going to make today for just 2 people. But one of the things that I like about it is that I think it's fairly easy to scale up. So if I want to double it for a family of 4, I just have to double all of the ingredients. If I was making it for my entire family instead of just for my husband and myself today, I would actually triple what I am doing today, because that would produce, you know, a serving for everybody plus a serving of leftovers for lunch the next day. My inspiration for this recipe is coming from one I saw on Gimme Some Oven, and I will leave that one linked in the description box below. I'm going to change it up quite a bit, but in that recipe she uses Brussels sprouts, so I'm going to be using those today. However, I do think this would work with green beans. I think it would work, especially fresh green beans. I think it would work with broccoli. I definitely think it would work with asparagus, like if you were to get some asparagus and just chop it up into little 1-inch pieces. I have rinsed my Brussels sprouts. I removed any of the outer leaves that didn't look very good, and I chopped the ends off of them and then sliced them lengthways. And now I am just kind of slicing them like this, like you would an onion. And I'm separating them out so that they'll be sort of like shredded Brussels sprouts. And I probably only need 3 of these large ones since I'm only gonna be making 2 portions of this meal today. I don't need a ton of Brussels sprouts. In this bowl here, I have 2 eggs, and I'm going to add to that a 1/4 cup of grated cheese. You could use just a standard Parmesan. I'm actually going to use some Pecorino Romano that I grated very finely. And now I'm just going to whisk the eggs with the cheese to make this little mixture here that we're going to add to the pasta. I have my pasta cooking in a pot next to me, a pot of salted water. I am cooking about 4 ounces of pasta. And then in this pot, I am sauteing the Brussels sprouts with a couple tablespoons of olive oil. You could use butter. I'm gonna season that with a little bit of salt and pepper. And I'm also gonna add a couple teaspoons of this minced garlic. I'm gonna let this saute for just about 2 minutes, and then I'm actually gonna turn the heat off while the pasta finishes cooking. I am cooking my pasta to al dente. It's almost done behind me. And before I drain that, I want to add about a 1/4 cup of that starchy pasta water to my egg and cheese mixture and just whisk it. I want to add that water slowly and whisk it as I'm adding it, just to temper the eggs so that they don't, you know, cook or scramble immediately when I add it to the rest of the ingredients. I drained my pasta and then just immediately put it here into this hot pot with the Brussels sprouts. And now I am going to add in my egg and cheese mixture. And I'm just going to keep stirring that with my tongs here with all of the ingredients, because everything in here is hot. And I'm just going to stir that around and make sure that everything is coated, that it makes a nice little sauce. I don't want the eggs to really scramble. You know, I just want it to make this nice creamy sauce with all of the other ingredients. And this is one of the ways that you can make carbonara, actually. And that was one of the other inspirations for this recipe. The recipe that I saw from Gimme Some Oven, and then the way that I traditionally will make carbonara. I just didn't use any bacon. Little more cheese. Never heard anything. If you wanted to check the temperature, you could. I think a safe tempered egg temperature is 160 or maybe 165. I typically don't worry too much about that, but you can definitely err on the side of caution. Now, the finishing touch for me is just another sprinkling of cheese and then just a pinch of red pepper flake. You could leave this out if you don't really like a kick in your pasta, but I think this just sends it over the top. That is really good. I almost don't even miss the bacon. Almost. Thank you to Bloom for sponsoring today's video. There's a link in the description box below if you want to check them out. Pick out one of these videos to watch next, and I'll see you there.